Great. Welcome to this live session by Justice Project Pakistan on policing without torture. My name is Ejaz Haider, and I will be moderating this session. Policing is delicate business. There's a reason I say this because when we talk about police excesses, in order to understand them, and police excesses can be defined in terms of abuse of authority, brutality, torture, it is important to put the concept of policing itself in the context of the modern state and its control of the population. Now, essentially, police at the basic level comprises a body of officers who represent a government civil authority. In other words, police are responsible for maintaining internal public order and safety. Now, this function typically requires enforcing the law and preventing, detecting, and investigating criminal activities. So, police essentially is a coin with one end marked as service and the other as enforcement. Now, service to the law abiding citizen in a state whose life and property must be protected against unlawful and or violent acts, and enforcement of law against those who break it. There are several different policing models in the world. In Pakistan, we have had a number of debates on how to reorganize and reform the police. The most ambitious to date was the 2002 police order, and that didn't really survive the departure of General Pervez Musharraf, even though, this is a point that I need to note, it was penned by three very experienced and respected police officers, Inspector Generals Afzal Shigri, Zulfikar Qureshi, and Shoaib Sadr. This evening, we will focus on the issue of police torture, though it should be fairly evident that minimizing, eradicating, and criminalizing torture are all related to reforming the police itself. But given the focus on torture, we shall be parsimonious. A word about the fact that the JPP launched a national public engagement campaign to reach out to vulnerable communities, students, and stakeholders in order to build consensus and garner support for criminalizing torture in Pakistan. JPP has also hosted panels at reputed universities, engaged transgender activists, and also marched to bring awareness and criminalize torture against women. This evening is part of that awareness campaign, but it is also special because I'm joined for this session by two serving police service of Pakistan officers, Muhammad Ahsan Yunus, who's currently Inspector General of the Federal Capital Police. IG Yunus has extensive experience of urban and rural policing. I also have with me Senior Superintendent Police Maria Taimur, who served as District Police Officer Pakpatan, and in that capacity has a solid field experience of policing. SSP Taimur is also a regular contributor to Dawn on policing matters. I must thank both our guest officers for taking time out for this discussion. I must also thank Muhammad Ali Nekukara, another very fine police officer, for helping us put together this panel. He could not join this discussion because of personal engagement. So let's dive right into our discussion. And I've given the introduction in English, but we could always have a mix of Urdu and English. We'll also, I'm assuming, since this is going live on Facebook, we'll probably have questions also. So essentially, it's going to be about 45 minutes for this. And we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes of questions that I'll ask the panel. And then, of course, if you've got questions from the viewers, we will be happy to share them with our panelists. So thank you so much. Let me begin with IG Yunus. So IG Yunus, there's, Pakistan is a signatory to a number of conventions that require domestic laws to be brought in conformity with those multilateral agreements, those conventions. So give me your sense as a police officer of why you think it's important that the issue of torture needs to have some salience, not just for the sake of the people that interface with the police, but also for police's own efficient work and its own image.
Bismillah ar Rahim. Sir, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to talk about torture and because Unfortunately, torture and policing, perhaps it is not, but are always talked together. That is a problematic issue because it is perhaps it is an accepted thing that police will always resort to torture to for any of its legal ambit and unfortunately sometimes illegal ambits. To my understanding, there are four types of torture which we see in our policing overall. First of all, it's the most common that investigation during the investigation, an accused is tortured for confession or during for any other information. Second is uh, a torture on the behest of somebody, some influential, to put their agendas. Third is sometimes a torture or a violence which we see during public assemblies, where people, where police resort to lathi charge, or baton charge, or something. And last, there is a torture in attitude as well. So these are the, to me, it are like four types of torture which police does, and we see it. Number of reasons behind it. First of all, obviously, we do understand that there is a lack of professionalism, and there is a lack of good investigation techniques where people are not well prepared to uh, conduct an interrogation, and obviously workload over an environment, and to get the things early is perhaps are the other factors which contribute to uh, immediate torture other and during the investigations. While not defending it, but it's also important that not talking it will also not yield no results. Yes, torture has been a part of overall police working, but if you could see in last 2 years, it's post 2020 when we had a number of torture-related deaths by police, like the Salahuddin case and other cases. Alhamdulillah, there is a clear decline which we are seeing in such custodial deaths. And at the very same time, policing is now getting itself with the new modern techniques, and now every investigating officer, almost other at least the second one which I experienced, uh, have do has the capacity to collect the data before interrogation, or at least to they try to confront the accused with their preparation. We are saying that it's in the phase of developing. So, but it's essential for future of policing. It is essential for overall police image. It's essential for public trust that uh, such transition is also evident from overall working, and it is displayed in such a manner that people tend to believe that. Sir.
Right, right. Very interesting points. Before I get to the organizational models that we have, and also some other nuances, let me pull in SSP Taimur here. SSP Taimur, you have written a lot about police reforms. You've also talked about the gender element. I just want to quickly, before we get into certain specifics, I want to get your overall take as not just a police officer, but also as a female police officer, with reference to and as I said in my introduction, you've also been the district police officer in Pakpatan, so you've got a field experience. We will also get to the sort of differences between urban and rural policing, but give me your initial assessment of how you look at this the problem of torture and the fact that we do need to have legislation that criminalizes it.
Thank you, Ijasa, for giving me this opportunity to speak on a very important topic. I think it is absolutely the right time to talk about this issue of criminalizing the torture because, first of all, we must understand that the different types of torture, like what the IG Islamabad he has outlined, we must go back to the roots of what is causing it or what are the reasons behind the torture and what sort of models of policing are we following here in Pakistan. Basically, we have to differentiate the sort of policing which has a history of colonization that is absolutely different from a police which was always independent, because there is always more room for revolutionizing the police and even evolving into a better service delivery mechanism if you have not been colonized earlier. So I think that if you go back to the root causes, this becomes one of the main reasons why the police reforms have had their setbacks and challenges in being implemented, and right now we are still grappling with a lot of issues related to police reforms. Secondly, I must say that as a female officer, this the use of excessive force basically is something that globally research has shown that wherever you put in females in law enforcement, they tend to use they are likely to use less force. They also do not indulge in excessive use of force. They always resort to dialogue, interventions, mediation, and such mechanisms which will try to mitigate the conflicting situation. So I think that once we go into the details of what are the alternate mechanisms actually available to eradicate torture from the policing methods, I think it is absolutely necessary to understand that there are effective mechanisms available for modern policing in the modern policing scenarios where we can actually come up with some alternate mechanisms and put them into our standard operating procedures so that we do a better job at what we do.
Right, excellent. So let's get to a couple of other things. IG Yunus also talked about something very important, which has always made me wonder. Whenever there's a high profile case and there's a lot of public pressure, it also brings a lot of political pressure on the police in terms of trying to resolve this, in terms of trying to get hold of people, in terms of, the entire process of investigation, interrogation, prosecution is kind of there's this pressure to expedite it, which I find somewhat ironic because these things take time, especially if the police is required to operate in a way which sort of syncs with the concept of modern policing. And SSP Taimur talked about the colonial past. We know that this under the 1861 Police Act, it was essentially the Irish constabulary model. In Ireland, they were called the Black and Tans, and again, ironically, the initial police uniform was exactly the Black and Tans here also. But interestingly, and this is a point that I want to focus on at this moment for IG Yunus, that even during those colonial times, the British residency towns, Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, they had the same kind of Met Police, model as in London. The rest of it was, of course, very different. Now, as I said in my introduction, there have been lots of debates with reference to that. India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka have gone on to have Met policing model, whereas in Pakistan we have not managed that so far. Now, do you think, IG Yunus, that that is something that would a kind of appreciate the difference between urban policing, especially policing in larger metropolises, and rural policing, and would that have some kind of salutary impact on how the police operates when it is interfacing with the citizens?
Sir, thank you very much. Essentially, this model of policing all across Pakistan is a rural model. Even if you go to police station Gulberg, of Lahore, you will see that settings are now much different. Now we have developed a front desk, we have developed camera-led with the cameras, fully camera-led policing. We have cameras all around. We have cameras in the lockups. But whenever you enter the room of an IO, investigation officer, you will find his charpai and his table together, and he will be wearing most of the time a rule clothing. So the spirit of policing is essentially rural. And even I must say and confess that even the police order to perform who is not able to get us out of that. The writing of cases now after this digitalization and much computerization, we have seen a difference now. We are starting a new journey, but obviously it will take some more time. Like to really believe that yes, we have changed. We have like put that rule model in the past. But I fully agree with you that in our system there is no differentiation between rural and the urban models. While even in Islamabad, the police station Karnol or Barakau and the police station Kosar, which is F7, F6 area, are working almost on a similar fashion. So the point which you have raised is essential. It should have an impact. But I also want to emphasize one point that we, the police leadership and our all police officers, tend to find the reform process always in getting new laws inside. Whether I think that there is a lot we can change at our own as well. So I think an hybrid approach of both can ultimately help. Just getting new laws will won't help. It is the essential change management or the leadership which like trusts the change, which can bring the change, which follows the change, will ultimately be able to make some headway in this regard. So
That's an excellent point, and I think one of the reasons I invited both of you was to get your perspective. I also believe that even in terms of legislation, there is, it's important to get the perspective of the police officers also because you're the practitioners. And as I said, policing is very delicate in the sense that on the one hand, it's about service. On the other hand, it's about enforcement, and bringing these two things together in a combination that allows you effective enforcement without sort of reducing the service aspect of it is something which is very delicate. And I think, as experienced police officers, it's important for you to give your input in the legislation process. But since IG Yunus talked about changes, on the police side, let me ask you, SSP Taimur, there is among other things, I mean, I'm just giving an example. There are obviously there are other ways of reforming this, and I would request your views on that. But here is a simple expedient. If the investigation rooms have cameras, if the investigation officer, before starting the investigation, says, I am so and so, I have suspect named so and so, this is the case for which I'm investigating this person, and the investigation begins at 1000 hours. All of this is recorded, and once the investigation ends, he again notifies that the investigation with suspect XYZ, reference case ABC, has ended for now. Now, if it is made imperative for every precinct that every investigation will be thus recorded, it seems to me that the possibility of torture will be greatly reduced. And in the event that a particular precinct cannot produce the recorded tape of an investigation, then it can also become the basis for prosecuting those police officers against whom there might be a complaint.
Yes, I think that you have really hit the nail on the head by saying that the requirement for a standard investigation room is a must. But deplorably, I must confess to this fact that we have not been able to come up with standard investigation rooms as yet in our police stations, even in the ones which are in big urban centers. Now, the one that you are indicating is that of a standardized investigation room, which has standard operating procedures with it and a method of investigation to go with it. Now, this is the long and short of it. If you go beyond that, the thing that even lesson indicated that we need to have mechanisms that actually the police at our own level. And one of those things that can be done at the police station level is to equip your police officers, the investigators, with skills. Now, those skills essentially are soft skills and hardcore policing skills both. And traditionally, most police in the developed world did almost half a century back. Also, the same method that we use here in Pakistan in 2022. So they also started with the sort of taking law into their hands and using third degree methods. But even though, despite the fact that we use third degree torture methods, despite the rate of so what goes on to say is basically 14 days investigation positive that if we equip our investigators with the techniques and methods which are modern, just like the forensics part of it, just like the science and technology part of it, the IT part of it, if we equip them like we use a lot of CDRs and geofencing and a lot of technology, what we call the technology-led policing. If the investigator is equipped with such methods, I'm sure that he or she will also is less likely to feel the need for employing torture. Because I believe that any person who enters the police station, whether as an innocent person or actually someone that there is ocular evidence that they committed a crime, but still they feel that within the bounds of the police station, they do not have any outside external help because we do not have legal advisors like we have in the developed part of the world. So, having said that, what I mean to say is that the person who is being interrogated or interviewed in the police station is already at a weaker position. So while they are already at a weaker position and they are being interviewed and interrogated by the police, it is very necessary to equip the investigator with proper modern investigating techniques so that not only it is helpful in the recording of the statements but the corroboration of evidence, because now we have other sister agencies working in collaboration with police for processing the evidence, and then there is the whole process of not only the collection but the corroboration, and then just because we have an adversarial law system that we follow here in the criminal justice. So basically we can always find the gaps which we can fill in, and if we try to fill in the smaller gaps, we should be able to come up with a system because we have tried and tested this system of torture for the last 7 decades, and unfortunately it hasn't worked out. So even if somebody thinks that it was the right way to do it, the statistics actually go against the normal perception. So I think that going with the modern techniques of investigation is actually the way forward. And like you said, that we need to have modern investigation rooms with the audio video recordings, and also the standard procedures to go with it. Not It's not a matter of the steel and concrete that is going to go into the investigation room. It is actually the training and the mechanism, the procedure, the laws that are going to basically be at the back end.
Absolutely. Excellent point. So here's the thing. Uh, Clearly, the senior officers, police officers, and two of them are with me
Sir,
in this
may
session.
I interject a bit in it, sir? Sorry.
Gigi, please go ahead. Ji Hasan Saab, go ahead.
Sir, there is a very nice term known as creative compliance. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Ji, I can hear you.
Okay. So there is a term known as creative compliance, and we are as a nation are very good in creative compliance. Uh, you know, you won't find any torture in any lock. Similarly, you won't find much of an issue in any front desk where cameras were put in. We have tried this by putting interrogation rooms which were having a cameras, and we have also put cameras, audio visual cameras in some investigation and inquiry rooms as well. Unfortunately, the term creative compliance, no torture or no bad thing will happen before the camera. So you have to like put the whole scenario in focus that the people are pretty smart enough that they will not be doing anything illegal before camera. So that is not the perhaps the whole solution. So the problem which policing and the investigation is facing is much more than just putting the cameras around. At this
No,
moment, there is no
so,
function
so,
specialization on it when we have sorry,
no, no, go ahead, go
please.
ahead.
So, so my point is that there is an investigation officer who is because the previous old beat model is still working. That all the crimes happening in this beat number one will be investigating by Mr. SI Falana, and there is one ASI with him. Both these two will be the beat investigation officers, and all those cases happening in that beat, regardless of the fact that one case is of a sexual violence and the other cases of a murder and the other cases of a dacoity. Then there is a 489F of check fraud. So this is leading us to nowhere. And IO is dealing with check fraud, and at the very same time, he is taking care of sexual violence as well. So it is not leading us to anywhere. It is not contributing to the capacity of investigation officer. It is not leading to better conviction, and it is not leading to the good investigations as well. What we have suggested that we have divided investigation in largely 4 to 5 different functions because all the crime against property, meaning by robbery, dacoity, is headed should be done by separate squads. All the homicide should have a separate squad. All the fraud and forgery should have a separate squad. So people improve themselves, learn the techniques of good investigation, and present good cases before courts. And believe me, when you do it, I have partially done this in Rawalpindi, and now we are trying it to do in Islamabad as well. What you have a pretty good conviction in homicide cases. We have a pretty good conviction some in narcotics cases because we have designated IOs, investigation officers, for those specific offenses. So it is not only just putting cameras; it is also making proper functional specialization in investigations, equipping the IO, making him or her more professional by trainings and all that thing. They will, and then the cameras. This will all make a whole solution. It is just putting cameras is not the whole answer, sir.
No, no, I completely agree with you. Let me just explain that the expedient of having the cameras was just simply an example of how things can be tackled. Obviously, cameras in and of themselves, unless you change the culture, unless you change the approach, unless you reorganize the entire thing, and I completely agree with you that you need to have specializations and sub-specializations. And this is not rocket science. I mean, there are best practices across the world, and we can always pick them up. We don't really have to reinvent the wheel. I'm also very happy. I mean, I think that is the essence of the program, the session. Very happy that the police officers, the police leadership is cognizant of the problem of torture, is also convinced that this is something that needs to go. SSP Tamur very rightly said that it doesn't. Statistics do not show that resorting to torture is automatically going to be effective as far as prosecution is concerned. We actually saw this. I mean, there are a number of studies now in the US and in the West with reference to what euphemistically was referred to as enhanced interrogation techniques during the so-called war on terror, they did not really bear fruit. And there is empirical evidence also, and there is conceptual evidence also that it doesn't really work. And I think forensics, the focus on professionalism, the ability to perform their duties professionally are more important. But here's the thing, and uh, let me make a comparison, not in terms of functioning, but in terms of creating a professional medium. The army also gets its recruitment from the same areas as the police does. Uh, and then, whether it's for the officer cadre, which goes to the Pakistan Military Academy, or to various centers where the soldiers are initially trained, a median level of professionalism is created. So every task has check boxes. And so once you are, whether a patrol car is stopping someone, those people must know the number of boxes they have to check. Whether someone is being investigated, the investigating officer needs to know what boxes he has to check and in what way. So this is one thing which I'll take to SSP Taimur. And the other thing has to do with the two tiers of policing here in Pakistan. You belong to the upper tier. You belong to the Police Service of Pakistan, which is a federal service. The actual interface of the citizen happens with the provincial cadres. Uh, there is a very clear difference in terms of education, socio-economic backgrounds of these two tiers. And so there needs to be, and one of the reasons I talked about the difference between urban and rural policing, and I talked about met policing models, is there need to understand this, to also conceptualize this as part of legislating and criminalizing torture, and also for the police itself on its part to do certain things, to write a position paper and say to the government, these are the things that we face, and these are the things that you must incorporate in terms of reforming the force.
First of all, I would resort to the point that you made on the different SOPs that are in place, and definitely there is no shortcut to having a proper procedure, because when it comes to penalizing the different investigators, or for that matter other human resource, it is actually a challenge for the supervisory officers, because if we want to penalize them for something that they did wrong, we actually do not have a list of things how to do them. And I, as a level officer, I feel it very challenging. So that if I have to penalize the officer for a wrongdoing, I really need to have a checklist with me already, from which I can tell him or guide him at least, so that the whole process of penalizing and punishment, reward and punishment, does not spiral down to just a few show cause notices or something, that he should remember that he was penalized for something. Actually, punishment is for them to learn. So I am a very ardent proponent of having such checklist, even if the checklist is not exhaustive, even if it has just 4 to 5 check boxes. It is absolutely understandable and much more doable by our junior ranking officers who are actually at the technical level. And in consequently, it also becomes easier for the supervisory officers to guide them and then steer them. The course correction can only be done when there are certain things already there in black and white, and that is the difference between us. I will just quote an example, just a little transgression. The way raids are conducted in the British police, they have a proper mechanism of putting everything in black and white, and that is why in collateral damage, when they lose their men in the police force, there are no inquiries held in the way that we exercise here, because everything is there in black and white. Their homework is done, and if there are any mistakes or gaps found out in the operation at the tactical level, you can always go back in reverse engineering and you can actually find out what you did wrong or what was wrong in the manner that you conducted the raid. So this is just a very small example, and if we compare it to the operations that we do here, I think that we still are a far cry from what we should be futuristically doing at the tactical level and then at the operational and ultimately at the policy level. Secondly, you talked about the differences in the two tiers. I am also a big supporter of the leadership models, and I have done both urban policing and rural policing, and I've seen that if the supervisory officer, if the officer in command and in charge is very clear about human rights violations, about torture, about vulnerable groups, if he's sensitized and they show a clear tilt, it's not something in a very lukewarm manner, but they show their priority for the weaker in position. I have seen that our human resource is astounding, and the sort of followers that they become, they see that if there is will in the leadership, they always follow that course. And in that way, I must admire our junior ranks that despite the very challenging conditions that they work in, despite the lack of resources and the lack of support that their counterparts get in the armed forces, I think they are doing a good job. But I think it's basically the gap is more at the leadership level. And like you've seen, like respected IG Islamabad has shared with you that they are going towards specialization of units, and making such small changes and taking such small steps is actually the way forward for reforming the police.
Excellent points. On this tactical side, raids that you mentioned, just a segue. I have long held that police should not have assault rifles, especially in the urban environment. They should be trained to use sidearms. I've also seen some of the elite units train, and I must say that the standard of training needs to improve drastically. But here's the thing, IG units. I think this was back in 2017. I was at the Central Police Office in Lahore, and we were being given a briefing. And so, as per that briefing, the bayonet strength of Punjab Police was 186,000, out of which 125,000 were constables, essentially for watch and ward functions with zero policing skills in terms of any skill set, whether it's investigation, whether it's, and even in watch and ward, there are a number of loopholes. So, do you believe that there needs to be a greater percentage of budgets going into police training, especially of the cadres with which the citizens are going to interface?
Thank you, Jasa. Very good question. This is the thing which perhaps taking all of my focus nowadays, that in our training curriculum, officers do not believe in that training. This is very interesting. Allow me to use this sentence in Urdu के सर फील्ड में जो पढ़ाया जाता है ऐसा फील्ड में नहीं होता. So in my understanding, this is our first and foremost task, to make them believe that whatever is being taught is correct. So this is most important thing, that because until and unless you believe in your training and you believe that this is the training which is imparted to you with an ambition to practice this training in the field, this is very important. Because that's why I'm an ardent believer that now we should be taking all the correct case studies in our training. We should be asking our trainees to go to police station, find the case, come back, so that we come up with the gap which they feel or allege that ऐसा तो field में नहीं होता. इससे we need to come out of this one. It is most important that for any change, for anything, there is no shortcut to training. One, two. As the New York model of Bretton went, make commanders responsible for the deeds of their subordinates. This is also very important after training. Then, as Madam Maria had rightly indicated about the checklist and all that, I want to like put this on record that with Sir Muhammad Ali Nekukara's input and his advice, we had developed a discipline matrix for Punjab Police, and it is being followed at this moment. So that there are certain standards of punishment. There is a conduct which is or misconduct which is defined well. I will request you to go through that document. It is an exhaustive document. And at the very same time, we have developed our case files as well for every specific crime. There are checklists for every specific crime, and we have distributed into multicolors. So there are like 10 different color files which deal with specific crime, so that IO is able to checkmate the checklist, and so and his supervising officer is able to while fully supporting your idea and of training. I think this is the foremost of foremost importance that we make our training afresh than ever before into the new time. So,
Right. There are a number of issues one can go on. It's a very expansive topic, but since we have paucity of time, let me ask both of you, starting with SSP Taimur. Since I believe there is a consensus here that torture is a problem and that it needs to be eradicated and it needs to be criminalized. Uh, if you were asked, SSP Taimur, if you were asked for your input, and I know, I mean, I'm asking you to sort of uh, capsule this thing, and it's difficult because there's so many complex issues. But if you were asked your input by the legislators, if you were to brief a committee or subcommittee of parliament on this, what would be the 3 or 4 salient points that you would present to them?
I think that this is something that there is absolutely consensus even at the leadership level of the police, and also in the supervisory ranks and then the junior ranks, that torture is something that we resort to just because we do not have any alternate methods. So probably the first suggestion that I would volunteer to make would be that I can probably come up with a presentation or talking about all the different alternate methods and then the procedures mechanisms to support them. Secondly, the different, I think just because we keep on and we don't say it much, that police is always a reflection of the society that we police. When, as police officers, we are sitting in our offices or whether in the field operations, the expectations of the public from the police are very hyperbolic, and they expect the police to indulge in unjust practices. And from your own experience of being a journalist and covering so many different diverse sections of the society, at least on the urban side, you must be in knowledge of the fact that whoever is aggrieved, both of the parties who approach the police basically wants the police to indulge in human rights violations or anything of the sort with the other party, which who their opponent is. So I think there are mechanisms which at the societal level we need to address those societal factors, and it must be done through alternate means of media, social media, and other education, probably reach out programs where the society needs to learn that to uphold the law you must be a law abiding citizen. And just because the police thinks that injustice has been done to you and they are standing on your side does not mean that you are in a position to oppress your opponent, even if they are the accused, and they will be, because there is a due process of law which has to be followed. So I think that the second thing I would request from the such committee would be to come up with a group of stakeholders where they can identify such social behaviors which are actually exhibited in the behavior of the police.
Right. Uh, do we still have Asan Saab with us? Uh, Asan Saab could probably, if there is a connection problem, you could. Yeah, okay, we got him back. Uh, so, Asan Saab, any salient points with reference to if you were asked to brief Committee of Parliament? Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Asan Saab? I think you have your mic muted. Yeah, I think we have lost connection with Asan Yunus Saab again. But thank you so much. I think this is just the beginning, and I'm really grateful to IG Asan Yunus. Also very grateful to SSP Maria Tamur for their input. This is, as you can see, a very important issue. It also is, in some ways, a class issue. Well, I think we've got IG Yunus back again. Can you hear me, Asan sir? You can't hear me? SSB Tamur, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I don't know. I think there is a. Yunus sir, why don't you switch off your video? Maybe your connection is kind of unstable. If you switch off your video, you might be able to hear me. Just use the audio. Can you do that? Okay, the sound is lost. I just got Yunus Saab's message. But anyway, thank you. Thank you to both the guest officers. And I think we'll have more occasion, perhaps in person, a roundtable or something at some point to talk about these issues. There is clear consensus. And as both the officers said, that there is the police leadership itself is cognizant of the imperative of eradicating these practices through a number of measures, better training, better specializations, better reorganization, better infrastructure in terms of having dedicated investigation rooms. I remember some years ago I was talking to IG Shaukat Javed Saab during one of my programs, and he actually talked about the fact that instead of having too many precincts spread across, and he was talking about Lahore, but the solution was not just for Lahore. That instead of having too many precincts, we should have a less number of purpose-built buildings, and so that we have different areas within the building which will deal with different types of crimes and complaints. Something that IG Yunus was also talking about. So anyway, for this evening, I will thank my guest officers once again. And inshallah, we will be talking to them and others also in the near future. Thank you and Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you.